Welcome in to the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you here with us, joining us for episode 74, or excuse me, yes, episode 74 of the podcast. Crazy that we're approaching three-quarters of the way to 100. Pretty wild thing. If you think about it, I want to welcome you in and remind you that if you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, check us out over there for the video version of every podcast, as well as all of our latest reactions to the newest Star Wars episodes, including the Bad Batch, which the newest one went up earlier this morning. Our reaction to episode 9, which we're going to be discussing today in this podcast episode. And shout out to the 398 of you who are subscribed over there. And we are approaching 400 very quickly, Joey. Only two away now. So if you're one of the people out there not yet subbed, you're considering it.
Come on
Get
in.
us to 400. We appreciate you guys so much. You can contact us as always at hothangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars related thoughts or questions or otherwise. We'd love to showcase them here on the pod and discuss them as well. You can find the Hoth Hangout podcast anywhere you get your pods, including Spotify and Apple. And if you're listening on those platforms or any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave one. We would appreciate it very much. And it also does allow the podcast to be more easily discovered by other Star Wars fans as well. We're also findable on all the socials, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, or X. We're findable at Hoth Hangout on each of those. Additionally, one of our more recent announcements in just like 2 or 3 weeks ago was that we do now have a Hoth Hangout community Discord server available as well. If you're interested in joining a fun community of Star Wars loving folks, the link for the Hoth Hangout Discord will be down in the description and in the show notes of today's episode. Check it out. I definitely recommend. Just to tease a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today, got a great episode that we're going to be discussing. And so we learned a little bit more, or maybe we didn't. That'll be part of our discussion as well about Omega's force powers. And so we want to tease the question: will Omega use a force power during the rest of the Bad Batch season 3? That will be part of our discussion as well. But before we get into any Bad Batch discussion or any Star Wars thoughts, Joey, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm well. I haven't seen you again in I don't know how many hours, and so these double duty days are always fun because
Yeah.
we wake up at 2 in the morning, watch the show together, do some edits if we need to, and then we come right back the following night to record the podcast episode. These are the days that we live for, Ben. When there's episodes we have to be watched. Hopefully, the acolyte will be a little bit more kinder in the time zone area for us. But in the meantime, we got a few more episodes of the Bad Batch, and just excited to see how it's gonna end. But we got to get through this episode first.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, this was an even busier week than usual because we had a podcast that released on Thursday as usual, a reaction that released on Wednesday, and we also had a box break that
Yeah,
released,
that's right. Yeah.
what was that, on Monday or Tuesday? I can't even recall now, but 3 videos in 1 week. Look at us going. Uh, well, as you mentioned, we do have lots to talk about with the newest episode, that we got this week, episode 9, The Harbinger, which of course was obviously referring to someone special in the episode we're going to be talking about for a good bulk of today's discussion. Before we get to any Bad Batch news, as always, we want to touch on a couple of news pieces that came out in the last week in the world of Star Wars. First of all, a pretty cool announcement is that Star Wars Celebration Japan, which is taking place in April of 2025, released the key art for this celebration, and it looks really
It
cool.
looks so good.
It's this infusion of Star Wars with sort of traditional Japanese artwork with the kind of the flag on there as well, and Mount Fuji. It's looking really cool. I love the way this looks. I think we've definitely talked about Star Wars Celebration. I don't know if we've talked about Star Wars Celebration Japan before or not. But tickets for this go on sale, thinking, yeah, May 2nd
Oh.
at, and if you're someone who's really looking to go, 4 p.m. Pacific time, that's what, 7 p.m. Eastern time,
Hmm.
is when the tickets go on sale. So if you're looking to snatch some tickets up right as they go live, there's the time for you.
Yeah.
But Joey, would you ever consider going to? Well, first of all, what do you think of the key concept art or the key art for the
I
event?
mean,
And-
it's beautiful the way they incorporated that Japanese art style, along with the flag, kind of the red sun, in the
Mhm.
background with the mountain, within it. Yeah, this is a beautiful piece of work with kind of like the purple flowers there as well, really giving it that Japanese art style. Yeah, and it has some Tie fighters, some X-wings. Yeah, so and if you notice the Darth Vader figure on it has kind of that space look to it
Mhm.
as well. So yeah, this is it. I almost want to just get this piece of art just so I could have it because it's a beauty.
I imagine there'll probably be posters selling with this piece of art on it.
Hmm.
At least I would hope so. Also, shout out to the AT-AT on the poster as well. Little Hoth representation on
That's
there,
right.
if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, and if you are looking to buy those tickets, I know for the I didn't look at the packages this time around, but normally like those really high end VIP packages, those are the ones that go first because they
Mm.
have all of the access that you want. You can, skip lines, and you can, I'm not sure if it includes specific meet and greets with like actors or anything like that, but normally you just have access to pretty much a whole bunch. So those are the ones that are going to go first.
Okay, okay. Are you considering going to Star Wars Celebration Japan in about what would that be? 16, no, 13 months from now?
No, not at all.
Okay. I would honestly love to if it was a
Yeah.
viable option.
Right.
Uh, I don't know how realistic that is, but
Yeah.
if someone came up to me and said, "Hey, here's free tickets and you have no other obligations in life," I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yep.
Having said that, I also think it's unlikely I will go, but
Yeah.
never say never.
Never say
I
never.
won't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I won't completely rule it out, but
Hey,
anyways,
listen, we
oh,
didn't think we were going to have Asajj this year
that's
in
true.
2024. So who knows what 2025 will bring?
Exactly, exactly. I like the optimism. By the way, we're gonna touch on more pessimism for all of you folks over on X later in about 5 minutes from now. But last thing I wanted to mention on this piece of news is that I didn't realize this is the first time in 17 years that Star Wars Celebration will be held, or a Star Wars Celebration will be held in Japan.
Oh, really?
So yeah, yeah. So cool that it's kind of coming back to a place that it hasn't been in a while. That's pretty neat. And I just feel like, especially after having seen Star Wars Visions, I just feel like the culture of anime, especially, and the way that that ties in to these creations of these new Star Wars stories and Star Wars Visions, is something that I was particularly drawn to when that show
Hmm.
came out. Excuse me. And so there's something about kind of this announcement in and of itself. I would love to go to Star Wars Celebration Japan. Let me just
Right.
say that.
Hopefully,
Um,
hopefully it'll be a little bit closer in 2026 or 2027.
yeah, yeah, hopefully so. Live stream,
Yeah,
Hoth
we'll do
Hangout
that.
live stream. Yeah. Next piece of news we wanted to touch on. This is actually really cool. I had no idea this happened until you had sent it to me, or shared it in our podcast notes. Is that on the Empire State Building there was this ILM Industrial Light and Magic production of just many, many, many different scenes from Star Wars. I actually took an opportunity to watch like the better part of the whole 5 minute video, and it is very cool. And I
Hmm.
can't imagine how difficult this was to make. I think I read that it took 4 months to make this entire thing, and then it took 46 individual, pretty big projectors to make
Oh.
this moving image on the side of the Empire State Building actually work. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll share the link down in the show notes of the episode as well. If you want to watch the 5 minute video after after listening to the podcast, because it's pretty cool. Or if you just go over to YouTube, you'll be able to find it pretty easily on the official Star Wars page if you just type in like Star Wars Empire State Building or something. But did you get a chance to watch the video, Joey?
Yeah, that is what I mean. That the way that they're able to make it all project onto the building like that, I would have loved to be there. Imagine you're kind of walking around Manhattan, and then
Yeah,
you turn to your left, and it's like, is that a 100-foot Vader right there, or
right.
or
I think it would have
100 floor meter right
yeah.
there. I should.
I think it would have been even better if you didn't expect it. You just turn, you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah,
awesome," you know?
yeah. There were some people that were they interviewed after it, and they were like, one lady said like, I don't know where the music was coming from, and then we had to turn around and we saw it was Star Wars. I'm like, oh man, I would have loved to come out of work to see that.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I think I also read that, the sound was done by Skywalker Sound, which is
Mm,
the sound design company that's owned and operated by Lucasfilm. So, this was kind of an entirely, with the exception of the actual physical projectors, an entirely in-house project with Star Wars, with Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound kind of putting this together. I don't remember what this was for. I thought I read it and I was still a little bit confused. It just said a build up to May the 4th.
hmm
I was like,
I
okay. I
know
mean,
that there were some, they released some of the action figures that they're going to release throughout
mm,
there as well during May the 4th. So I think that that was part of it, and just kind of like a promotional thing for that, as well as
I
just the May the 4th all in general, and probably everything that's the 25th anniversary of Phantom Menace, and so everything like that as well. I would assume was part of it.
I was so focused on the image that I completely glanced over the fact that the title of this thing is Imperial March, and I just completely missed the pun of it being March.
Oh,
I
I
think
actually did too.
yeah. I was reading it, and it just now occurred to me that the reason it's Imperial March is I think they've been doing stuff like this throughout the entire month, so
mm,
some sort of product campaign, but a good one nonetheless. Pretty cool, I
we
would
love
say.
Star Wars.
Yeah. Last piece of news we wanted to touch on today is that this is somewhat related to Star Wars. You could argue very related to Star Wars. And to spare you the details of kind of the background of this, uh, just a very, very brief synopsis is that there's an upcoming Disney shareholders meeting, which annually takes place typically the first week of April. And there's like there's
Hmm.
like a proxy fight, is the way it was described in the article, and like different like groups of people backing other groups of people to maybe form a new board on Disney, is how I interpreted it. But the important part of all of this is that George Lucas came out publicly endorsing Disney's CEO Bob Iger, and as a byproduct, also Disney, the company, or at least its current leadership, the company. And the reason that's important, obviously, is not only is George Lucas the creator of Star Wars, he is the world's largest individual shareholder in Disney as a company with over 37 million shares just to
Oh,
his own name. Joey, if you're counting, that's over $4 billion. Just
yeah.
a little bit of pocket change, you know?
He could probably make it to Japan.
Right, right. Yeah, I hope so. No, but this is I think the reason this gained a little bit of attention in Star Wars media outlets and Star Wars news is because I think George Lucas has remained um not entirely neutral. I think he's withheld his opinion. It feels like a lot of the times when it comes to new Star Wars content. And so this is one time where he's very vocally, while it's not explicitly geared towards Star Wars,
Hmm.
very vocally coming out in support of
Mm.
Disney as a company. Now you could argue he's biased because he has like a lot of money invested in the company. But for what it's worth, he is backing the current administration of Disney and CEO Bob Iger as a process of that too. So, you know, I don't really know how this will, shape the future of Disney. I don't know how much, obviously, George Lucas has some sway. I don't know what Disney will look like a year or even a month from now, perhaps. But worth noting, George Lucas did publicly come out, supporting the current administration and leadership at Disney.
I feel like he's been consulted in some of the newer shows, though. No,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think he's been a consultant for a lot of different things,
yeah,
if not most or all.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like you owe it to him at least, you know, like even if he doesn't agree, at least run it by him because it's like it's his, you know. It's not anymore, but you know what
Right,
I
right.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, you like to go to the source and and ask them,
yeah,
Is this kind of what it looked like to you?" Or I don't know if they even went that far, or if it was more like, "This is this is just for you to know that this is happening, and you
yeah.
don't really have any decisions around it." But There you go. Here's so how would you think Bo-Katan would act? Whatever.
Right, right.
Maybe a thing here or there for it, but I don't know. Like you said, a big thing of it is the $4 billion that he that he is part of this. So although I'm a little bit more of a skeptic to the whole thing, where like yeah, of course he's gonna back the company that he is the single most amount of shares for one person.
Right.
I'm curious of how much of the company that actually is
Yeah,
at
that's
the
a great
30
question.
32 mil. What was how many 37 million shares?
37 million.
Yeah.
Um, I would, if I had to guess, I mean, Disney is so big that it's probably okay, yeah, so whatever 37 million is divided by roughly 1.8 billion.
Oh,
So 37 million divided by 1.8 billion. I mean, it's probably it's still less than 1%, isn't it?
right.
Yeah, I mean, 2%, I think. He owns 2% of the shares of Disney. Is that right? Someone in the comments can fact check my math, but he owns a considerable portion of the company is what's important.
Yeah.
So, let us know down in the comments what your feelings and thoughts are on the recent George Lucas comments. And speaking of comments, we do have a couple we wanted to showcase. Actually, one at the beginning of the podcast right now, and then another towards the end of today's episode. A special question related to Asajj that we thought better to include towards the end of today's discussion. First comment, though, is from Jack Brody over on YouTube, who says, the show looks fantastic. And this is in reference to the Acolyte trailer, by the way. The show looks fantastic. People are misinformed because of the internet these days, and a large portion of people that think everything is pushing an agenda in Star Wars, which is absolutely not true. Leslie Headland is a massive Star Wars fan. It's going to be great, and I anticipate it being as praised as Andor by a large amount of people. The negativity from non Star Wars fans that think the show is pushing an agenda because of all the political clickbait videos out there. And so this is kind of related, of course, to what we were talking about. A pretty big segment of last week's episode was talking about not just the Acolyte trailer, but kind of just our thoughts on the Acolyte, and just sort of like the negativity surrounding the upcoming release of the show. And I definitely resonate with what Jack is saying here. I personally am like I thought that I thought from the trailer, there wasn't anything that made me feel negatively about the show. If anything, I'm more excited now.
Right.
Um, but ultimately, like, I wanna be the person who sits down on, day 1, episode 1 with an open mind, and if it's good, awesome. If it's not good, well, then we can, judge it according to the content of how good the
Right.
episode was. But to go into a show, like, wanting to hate it, I feel like is a wrong approach, especially as a Star Wars fan, like, if you are looking forward to something and you're not I mean, it's okay to be skeptical. I think that's fine. I think when you, like, cross over to the territory of, like, "This is gonna suck because X, Y, and Z," I feel like it's just sort of setting it up to let you down. And for what it's worth, maybe it's not gonna be as good as Andor, but, I personally am excited for The Acolyte. What
Hmm.
about you?
I try to be diplomatic about my answer here, but I mean I still don't get the all of the negativity towards it. Some of the comments were very much politically driven, kind of like what this the viewer said here as well. And although maybe I'm just on the side that just will never see that kind of stuff, and my mind doesn't go there first. That's never where it goes. And I feel that there are people that will constantly pick out these types of details specifically to cause a ruckus and say, "Hey, this is wrong. This is not my Star Wars, whatever it is." And whether it is Star Wars or if it's Marvel or if it's anything, they will find that one little thread that they can pull at and kind of yank at it until everybody can hear them from the rooftops. And I wonder if it's this is one of those things where somebody said something, one person or a set of people say, okay, this is how we're going to attack this particular show. Everyone go after it, because the numbers just didn't make sense to me. How are you going to have more people disliking this Star Wars trailer? It was a trailer, Ben. Like, it
Right.
wasn't even that much of content to completely tear into it the way that people did. I felt like like you said, it was unfair, to judge it upon, judge it in that way. And um yeah, because I mean, this is an entire 8 episode series. That again, and I don't see anything, in the trailer itself that points me to anything politically driven, or I mean, we've got Star Wars, man. This is what we've been waiting for, another completely new era. Now, will there be things that maybe don't line up canonically? That we talked about. Um, 100, they said, it was only 100 years before episode one, but in episode one they said that the Sith haven't been around in a long, long time, and so there are going to be some things like that. Okay, this is Star Wars. These are stories that different people tell. Sometimes they don't line up. That's just the reality of it. But I don't even feel like those are the people that are like so extremely negative about this particular trailer.
Right.
It just seems like this whole other crowd came out of nowhere and kind of just bashed this into the ground. So, all that to say, I mean, I kind of agree here with Jack Brody, the user here, the viewer here, in that it just doesn't seem like that's what it's doing. For whatever reason, it was kind of picked on. But here's the thing, also, is that people are talking about it now. That
Right.
maybe good, any press is good press, right? So I think I saw something on StarWars.com saying that this was like the most watched like trailer or something like that. And so okay, we'll take that engagement too, I guess. And so now more people will be watching it. More people will be either bashing it or loving it or whatever. So maybe it's just causing that discussion. That's what good art is. It causes, it brings discussion, to the forefront. And if we can have those discussions in a civil manner, that's fine with that too. But the fact that they was so negative coming out of the gate like that just still shocks me. But we'll see what happens if they come up with a second trailer, Ben. If if they completely go after it again.
I was surprised that they waited as long as they did to come out with the first trailer. I mean,
Hmm.
we're only what, a little over 2 months from the release of this show. I mean, I don't know what the typical timeline is for releasing the first trailer, but it feels like we got the Obi-Wan trailer, for example, like way before the first episode came out. I mean, I don't know what all goes into that decision making, of course, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna approach episode one the same way I approach episode one of any Star Wars show. I'm gonna go into it, as I mean, it's inherent as a Star Wars fan. You're hopeful that anything is gonna be good.
Sure.
At least I'm that way. I think you're that way. I think most Star Wars fans are that way. I would argue if you go into a Star Wars show hoping it is terrible, like, are you a Star Wars fan? I don't know.
Right.
Maybe you are, but that's a discussion we can have another day. Nonetheless, I'm looking forward to it, and
Yes.
I'm excited for Acolyte. I don't get a ton of the hate that it's getting, but
Yeah.
I hope it's great for what it's worth. I
Well,
hope it's
thank you for
great.
the great
So
comment, though, Jack. That's a good
yeah,
discussion.
yeah, definitely. Um, and something that we did ask in last week's episode, ironically, the question of the week was, "Will Asajj Ventress finally make her return in episode 9 of The Bad Batch?" The folks on YouTube were much more optimistic about the return, with 91% saying yes, only one person voting in it nope. Meanwhile, the folks on Twitter a little bit more pessimistic, like I said a little bit earlier, but the yeses still did win with a 60 to 40% split on the vote that Asajj would return. And what do you know? Both YouTube and X were correct in their conclusions that Asajj would make her return in episode 9 of The Bad Batch. Of course, moving into our discussion of the episode, that is what is going to be the center of the topics of our conversation today. Largely is going to be Asajj. I'm also going to touch a little bit on kind of what this episode means for Omega as it relates to M Count, aka midi chlorian,
Finally.
the banned word that we finally got. Yeah. So, having said all of that, let's dive into our discussion of the episode. Well, let me first ask you. Um, Moving into the episode, I think I was I think I asked you at the beginning of the reaction. And I can't recall off the top of my head what your response was. I think I asked you, "Do you think Asajj is gonna show
Right.
up in
Yeah.
today's episode?" And I think you said, "No, it'd be someone else."
Yeah.
Who were you thinking it was gonna be? And then
No,
what were your thoughts when
I
you
was
did see
messing. I was
Asajj?
messing. It was absolutely gonna be a massage.
I thought you were being sarcastic, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, yeah. If it was anyone else, I may have just quit. I may have just quit Star Wars. I would be on the side of the negative review
Mm,
group and give them a
yeah.
thumbs down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, we did end up getting Asajj. It was really cool to see. And the episode opens up on Pabu, the what would we call it? Safe haven that we've grown to love over the past season or so. Omega and Batcher stumble upon this ship in a cave, and immediately I don't remember if it was you or me, but one of us said, "But Asajj is going to be in there." And, it was almost like a bit of a joke, and then it was actually Asajj that was in the cave,
Right, right.
because, of course, as we saw in the previous week's episode, Fennec Shand, apparently communicated with Asajj to go to Pabu to meet them to test Omega, and so we find out who is it in the cave? Oh my gosh, whose ship is this? It's Asajj's ship. I don't know. Tell me if you felt the same way. I was sort of expecting her reveal to be like a lot more grand and
Sure.
like, oh my gosh, that's mind blowing. It almost felt like it just happened.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, oh, we're going with this. Okay, she's already in the episode. We're 3 minutes in and she's already here.
Right. I did
Did,
feel a
did you
little.
feel that way?
I I I think I mentioned this last week. I feel cheated that we knew. If we didn't
Right.
know, if we didn't know, can you imagine the reactions
Oh, it would have been
if
so
we
cool.
never knew Asajj was gonna be in this show? I think, so that was we kinda got that stolen from us now that I feel because for what, 8 episodes we kept saying, "Oh, is Asajj gonna be here? Asajj gonna be here?" So the fact that we waited that long almost took away from the excitement to see it just a little bit, But to see her kind of back in it, you're just like, okay, I could finally this comfortable. We can get back into this now.
Yeah, I think it probably makes sense that she was in the trailer from a marketing perspective.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at the trajectory of the season, like, apart from Asajj, what else is going to be the thing that you primarily market in the trailer if Asajj is not a part of 3rd season?
Hmm.
Like, it's a lot of probably the same stuff we've been talking about in season 2 especially, but really the whole show. And so I wouldn't be shocked if that was a strategic decision
Oh, absolutely.
to say, there's not enough, like, real I mean, for the true fans of The Bad Batch, like,
Yeah.
we would watch it no matter what. But for the average Star Wars fan who's kinda like, "Ah, I don't wanna watch animated Star Wars," like, or like, "Ah, I don't wanna start another show like The Bad Batch," but maybe they have seen Clone Wars or they're at least
Yeah.
familiar with Asajj. They see this character in the trailer, it's like, "Oh, well, now I feel
Right. Yeah.
obligated to watch the show."
Yeah. So
And
they definitely got you. I think you're saying that they definitely got more viewers the first 8 episodes than they would have
yeah.
if they didn't have Asajj in the trailer.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also pretty, I think, intentional to not
Mhm.
include her in the first half of the last season because, people know she's in the trailer at that point, so they're just waiting and waiting and waiting to see her. So, maybe the better question is like, how is it going to be moving forward? Is she not going to be in any more episodes, or maybe one or two more at most?
Yeah.
Are people going to feel the same level of excitement and enthusiasm about the show? I mean, it's getting closer to the end, so I would probably assume so, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is it, man. I think this was.
Oh,
I
okay,
think this was
okay.
all that we were gonna see of her, and it's
Oh,
gonna.
not at all in the rest of
No,
the
oh,
season, you
oh,
think?
oh, she's done. She's done for the season.
Oh, man, I hope not, but I also wouldn't be too shocked if that was the
Yeah.
case.
Hey, I'm just saying I called the Balin one. That
That's true.
yeah, that I mean it because she came in, did her thing, and you know, I don't know where she would fit in anymore. Her or Fennec, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I'm optimistically hopeful that both she and Finnick will be back some point in the season, but, it was great to have her in this episode, and she had some pretty awesome quotes, and really, it was one of our first experiences of feeling that sense of like mysticism in Star Wars again, kind of that sense of Jedi and Sith and what it really means to
Hmm.
like use the Force and like how that all functions. Like these conversations were very foreign to this show prior to this episode,
Yeah, true.
largely. And so she has a great quote just really early on when they're talking about M count before she actually says the word midi-chlorian. She's saying it's something in the blood. Everyone has it, but at varying levels. Those with a high count were believed to be more capable of wielding the force. And so this is just kind of like a really nice summary or synopsis of really what a midi-chlorian is or what M count is. And it almost took me back to sort of that prequel Clone Wars era where sort of these conversations about midi-chlorians, especially in Phantom Menace,
Hmm.
were kind of just commonplace. That's what this episode just made me feel like in my prequel vibes.
I
I
feel
was
it.
I was liking it. Yeah. Um, and so as a byproduct of all of this, discussion about M count midi-chlorians, she resolves to test Omega. And Omega's a little, not sure how these tests are actually real tests, but the first test is just simply balancing on one foot with a piece of fruit on her head. What did you think about the first one? I mean, I was a little bit like, that's the first test to see if she has a high M count. I don't know. What did you
Yeah, I
think?
mean, I have pretty good balance, I think. So I
You're
think
a Jedi.
I'm a Jedi according to
Yeah.
Omega. I don't know. I thought it was a little bit, little preschooly, and I think about all the younglings that probably went through something similar. Just because, and Omega kept saying that it was slippery on that rock, whatever, and I don't know. It seemed kind of easy to do in
Mm,
comparison, and but we don't know what Asajj is looking for here. I mean, she ends up saying something to Omega, stop trying to have balance, let go of your conscious mind. And Omega's just like, I don't know what that is, So, and it feels like Asajj is trying to talk to somebody who knows things about the Force already. Like,
right.
there should be, I don't know, like a booklet of just things that of vocabulary that you should know, things like conscious mind and the Force, and what that kind of means. But time and time again, Omega just like, I don't know what that is, so I don't know what you want me to do with it. So yeah, to see it in this way, I'm like, it's kind of weird, but I feel like Asajj has some idea, and to her credit, it does look like Omega's trying to figure this out, and she kind of does have this moment where she's really focused up and is able to do the task, but still, it's just, I don't know, seems a little pedestrian, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And then like this test was enough to kind of feel a little bit silly. But then the second test was literally like, run, get this flower, and bring it back to me, and do it before sunset. Which, in retrospect, do you think test two was actually a test, or she just wanted to
Right.
talk to the crew without Omega being there?
That's what I was thinking too when I watched it the second time. It was very much just like, just get her out of here. So because I think at that point, around that time, Crosshair had figured out that this was Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars,
Yeah.
from text files. So
Hmm.
I think that was around that time. I can't remember the exact order of things,
Yeah,
but
it's like right after Omega leaves to go get the flower, I think.
right, yeah. So maybe she already senses it at that time, and then she takes off. So yeah. So it feels like that wasn't a test either. I wonder if any of these were actual tests. Now that I think about it. Maybe the last one for sure, because that's very much a force using type of thing. This is just speed running. I don't know if that's necessarily something. And Omega cheated. She used a battery to get up there. So it just seems like, I don't know, this test was not an actual test from the start.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I don't know how I feel about test 2. I could buy test 1, but I don't know about the second one. But yeah, that's after Omega leaves, that's when that standoff happens between, the Bad Batch and Asajj, and there's this fun interchange of dialogue where Crosshair says, "We've taken down worse," and Asajj says, "So have I."
Yeah.
And there is this probably my favorite part of the episode was getting to see Hunter Wrecker and Crosshair go toe to toe with Asajj, and her making it seem like child's
Yeah.
play more or less. Which I honestly really like because
Mhm.
I think it puts into scope and perspective kind of how powerful a former Jedi, former Sith assassin, uh, this really strong Force user, just how incredible their abilities are that it feels like she's almost not trying for most of
Mhm.
the fight and still besting all 3 of them at the same time.
Right.
Just one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I'll probably say that at some point,
Absolutely. You know,
again
and
and again.
the way she was fighting against these 3 gave me memories of Count Dooku. How
Yeah,
she was kinda just standing there and just dodging and not really putting very little effort into some pieces of the fight. So very much a Dooku type of feel. So shout out to the to the choreography for that. So
yeah,
yeah, so I did enjoy, just like you, I enjoyed this piece here because they both were kind of this different breed of, Asajj is this, like you said, Jedi slash Sith assassin, where these clones were not clones at all. They're these special clones, and so it's like going toe to toe. But we knew in the end who was gonna end up on top, and for sure that was Asajj.
yeah, absolutely. And then, right as she's got the best of them, Omega returns with the flower, and kind of is somewhat able to, quench the fight between them. And Asajj kind of backs down and ultimately just, she's like, "We were all pawns in the same war, and we all lost. I'm many things, but I'm not your enemy." So you're sensing this very distinct difference in Asajj's demeanor when we've last encountered her during the Clone Wars era. She feels like someone who is not totally taken by the dark side
Hmm.
and more so operating within
Right.
that gray area, which is, a great tie into
Yeah.
Dark Disciple, and much of her character in this episode felt sort of inspired by her character's demeanor in that book as well that you and I both read. And to that point, Omega says to Crosshair, "People can change. I never gave up on you, did I?" And so, Omega, the constant optimist throughout this entire show, here is someone who has literally like done some very evil things, killed
Right.
lots of people. She was a Sith assassin for this huge period of time during the Clone Wars. And here's Omega just like, you know, everyone can change, which is a great thing to have a character like that in a show. But also at the same time, you're like, ooh, Omega, do you know what she did? At least I was thinking that. But
Right. Right. Yeah,
it's
and I think,
yeah,
even Asajj says, like, they told you what I did," so
yeah,
there was that line, but, going back to what you said about, Asajj kind of saying, like, we were all pawns in this war, it reminds me a lot of Darth Maul, actually, where,
mhm,
kind of towards the end of, him and Obi-Wan, this kind of everything there, it was like almost this understanding that, we were just used for this, we weren't, this was never our war, it was never our battle, we were all just puppets,
mm,
um so it very much reminded me of Maul in that sense. So right when you said that, I'm like, yeah, actually, that's what that, she reminds me of here. So yeah, I'm just curious now where she goes. I mean, we'll talk a little
mm.
bit more about that later, but with her coming back into into the Star Wars world, where does she come? Where does she end up with?
Yeah, yeah, it's an exciting thought, definitely. And yeah, like you mentioned, something we're gonna touch on at the end of today's episode. Um, so yeah, Omega, while she didn't pass the first test, she does pass the second, and then is introduced to a final test by Asajj, which is communicating with wildlife. So it's this sort of a weird three tests, like balance on a rock, a slippery rock with fruit on your head, go get a flower, and then talk to animals. It's like
Hmm.
that's the determinant of midichlorian count, but okay. So she says to Omega, "Close your eyes and reach out." Omega, for what Asajj says, everything. This to me felt very Luke
Mm,
and Yoda on Dagobah, or even Obi-Wan and Luke in New Hope. Just kind of the fundamentals of a master teaching a Padawan or an apprentice or a learner about the ways of the Force. there's something so Star Wars about that,
Mhm.
and it just feels very, um, homey. Like, I feel at
Oh,
home
yeah.
when there is a moment in an episode of any Star Wars show where there's someone teaching someone about the elements or the mysteries or the ways of the Force. I really, really liked this part of the episode.
Right.
Yeah.
I will throw in The Last Jedi with Luke and Rey as well. I started to mention that as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but the other side of it is Asajj didn't seem dark side at all in this. You mentioned it a few times during the watch on the reaction video that this is very much like kind of like light side type of this specifically is more of a kind of a light side move, if you will. And what does that mean? What does that mean in the world of Asajj? She later, she says that they're not their enemy, but she does sit in that gray area like we talked about before. And although her past maybe have been so dark, these types of actions that she does here, not only with, she kind of demonstrates her ability to talk to what ends up being this huge sea monster that comes out of the water here, and just to kind of see that, because I think of like Ezra, for instance. That's who I think of when I think of
Mm,
somebody who can kind of communicate with the animals. I think of Anakin in Attack of the Clones when he's able to tame some of the animals there too. So just to see that kind of that difference in Asajj is almost kind of weird because in animated form, at least, we only saw her in the Clone Wars, kind of in that that Sith assassin role for the most part. As you mentioned in Dark Disciple, we kind of see a little bit more of the gray, and now here we see come out on the other side where she's able to do these types of abilities, and even Omega says like, "Oh, that means you're a Jedi." Right? I mean,
mm.
she kind of says like, "Oh, that means you're a Jedi," and Asajj doesn't say anything like, "Oh, well, I kind of used to be a Jedi," and she's not going to go into the whole story. But you and me and everyone who's kind of watched her, like, okay, well, she kind of was, so she knows of each side. So, and I think that's one of the cool things about kind of being, mostly up to date. I'm not going to pretend that I know every single line Asajj Ventress has ever said, but I know kind of like where her roles were throughout of Star Wars. So, kind of cool that Omega can say that, and and we can say, well, yeah, kind of actually, kind of was a Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly hope that they go that direction with her character,
Hmm.
where I don't think they I like how she operates in the gray, but she does feel much more like a Jedi now than, like, anything near the Sith.
Right.
This beast tame ability is one that you mentioned, like, with Ezra, for example, is one that we've seen, Jedi use this, and we've never I don't, to my knowledge, never seen Sith use it. Um, not to say that I guess they couldn't, but this feels very light side of the Force, like you said, and is able to eventually even calm it down, which we see here. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, there's a cool picture, and there was a really neat picture as well. If you managed to catch our reaction um, to the episode, the thumbnail like is this wide angle lens shot of
Mhm.
Asajj, calmingly using the Force to instruct, if you will, the sea monster, which we lovingly termed the squidlack to put her down. So, um, yeah, I mean, all this entire, and I don't even know if we mentioned in this process. You may have said this, and forgive me if I missed it, but she saves Omega
Yeah.
too,
Right.
from being, you know, drowned or worse by the creature. So that's another element of her character. It was like, wow, she literally just saved the life of Omega. This is something Asajj would not have done 10 years ago or so. So, yeah, pretty cool to see. I just, from a character perspective, this was probably my favorite episode, and we'll get into kind of our thoughts on the grading of the episode later as well. But the byproduct of this encounter with the sea creature is that Asajj ultimately comes to this conclusion, supposedly that Omega does not have a high midichlorian count. And then, of course, after Omega has walked off, Hunter and Crosshair kind of call her out on the lie, which I'm of the opinion that she did lie
Hmm.
because, like, like the Empire, we've been led to believe the Empire is pursuing Omega because she has a high M count for this entire season.
Hmm.
And then like Asajj is supposed to just be able to tell that from a couple of tests with like no blood taking or anything like that.
Right.
So, I'm of the opinion that she was just lying to protect Omega so that she could stay
Right.
with the Bad Batch. Was that your interpretation as well?
It was, but I was a little confused too because she said like if she did have a high M count or midichlorian count, she would have to leave you guys.
Right.
And the way she said it, it seems like, well, yeah, if that was true, that's what would have to happen, and not, and I couldn't tell if it was her just saying, just saying that because it was true, like, okay, she doesn't have it, so don't worry about it, or if she's saying, well, she does have high M count, so but we don't want to take her away from, so I'm like, I'm kind of confused at what the
Mm,
message was ultimately there, but I think the little bit of ambiguity was on purpose, obviously,
yeah.
to question like, okay, well, where are we with this? And not saying that I know how to properly test. I'm not, commissioned to test the M count of anybody, but those three tests, I mean, outside of the last one, I don't see how you could figure all of that out anyway. But so yeah, the blood test. I think the way that this season has gone, it really seems like those blood tests were the defining factor because right
Yeah.
when they determined, kind of her blood count and what it looked like, who was it? Hemlock was right away like, do not engage. Make sure you
Right.
save her. And assuming that that's what they have been looking for this entire time, I would be surprised that she doesn't have a high M count at this point.
Yeah, I almost feel like it is conclusive that she does based off of Hemlock's reaction. And that would in turn, based off of what Asajj has said, I mean, that speaks even more to her like character at this point in
Yeah.
time. Like she knows that Omega is in danger, and according to what she said, she, I guess, places primacy on on Omega staying with the Bad Batch, even though that's probably not what should happen. So, anyways,
Right.
like
Yeah.
I think that just speaks to her character overall
Yeah.
at this
Absolutely.
point in the show. But and then there's even like a little bit of like I didn't know if this was like a jab at the fact that they retconned Asajj's outcome and that now she's alive. Because for those that don't know, check out like our podcast from a couple weeks ago where we talked about the events of the Dark Disciple book. But in that book, she does die, and that book is a post Disney acquisition novel. So that is, well, was canonical until it was retconned with this episode. So maybe briefly, how did you feel about the fact that they kind of just undid the events of Dark Disciple?
I think they left it a little bit open, just by the little quote that we have here to end off the episode, where Hunter says, "You're not worried about the Empire coming after you," and then Asajj says, "They can try, but I have a few lives left." So, just by saying that, that she has these multiple lives, whatever, however you figure that out. Well, we got the Night Sister magics, guys. This is,
True.
this is something that maybe we don't discover right now. But we saw, kind of its power in Ahsoka, the Ahsoka series, with all
Hmm.
those, all those ghost troopers. I can't remember the name of those, but yeah, those night troopers that were all, essentially, you think had the green magics come out of them every time. So I don't know, so I don't know if we're necessarily retconning this whole thing. At this point, I think they left the door open just a little bit, just so
Mm.
there's some ambiguity, so they can have an out somehow. So whether this ends up being like a comic book series where they're like, okay, well, this is how she got from Dark Disciple to the Bad Batch, or something a little more. Because although I do think this is the last we see of Asajj Ventress in the Bad Batch, this is not the last that we see Asajj Ventress in Star Wars.
I sure hope not. Yeah, I would love to see her again. And that's a good point you make too. Before we look at this last thing, like Darth Maul was literally chopped in half, and they brought him back. So it's like, you know, I don't think the fact that Asajj is in this episode, in this show, is necessarily 100% evidence that anything is retcon from Dark Disciple. Like
Right.
you said, anything could happen with Night Sister magics, and there have been people who have been killed and resurrected before Darth Maul. So you never know. You never know. Hopefully, we get the explanation someday. I would love that. But um, we teased at the beginning of the episode. We had a second comment that we were waiting till the end of today's podcast to discuss from Kid Caduceus. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Kid Caduceus, I believe, is a very recurrent listener of the podcast as well. So shout out to KC, as I will refer to this person for the rest of the episode. KC says, "Who would you cast as a live action Asajj?" Now, this got us thinking before today's episode, and to be honest, I didn't have, like, someone that immediately popped into my mind, so I consulted the Google search engine. But you did have a really good one, I think, just off the top of your head. So my Google search engine pick for who would play Asajj, the actress's name is Ruby Rose, and I've never seen anything that she's in. I believe she became famous from the TV show Orange is the New Black. But for those of you watching the video version of the podcast, like this woman looks so identical to Asajj Ventress that it's a little bit scary. I think she, I don't know how, I've never seen her act before, so based off of just the way that her face resembles Asajj Ventress, I'll go with Ruby Rose. As a shout out to Google search engine is also necessary
Nice.
here. But you had a really good one too that you
Yeah.
were going to share.
So the very first time I saw Saw's Ventures, I thought of this actress for sure. So this
Mm,
this this has been long going, and a lot of people have thought it too. So I'm not going to pretend I'm the first one, but and she might be a little too old for it, but she's in great shape always. So I think she could pull it off anyway. But easily Angelina Jolie
yeah.
probably also has that same type of look, bone structure, just kind of you picture her with the little hair now that we have on Asajj. Even if she went bald, I think she'd look great in this role. She's an action star. She's done some action movies as well. I think of like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and so she just has the chops for it. I think. Again, I don't know if that she's a little too old for the particular role, but I think yeah, just like many people probably have said in the past, I think my vote would have gone for Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid pick. Either one of these two actresses I think would be a phenomenal option. So let us know down in the comments as well. If you had to pick someone to play the role of live action Asajj Ventress, who would it be and why? Which brings us to the last thing we wanted to touch on for today's episode. Before we grade the episode, what role, if you had to guess, Joey, will Asajj end up filling? Not just in the Bad Batch.
Hmm.
You mentioned you don't think she will be back in the rest of this show,
Right.
but what role will she have in the greater Star Wars
Yeah.
universe moving forward?
So where are we in time? We are, after the Clone Wars, obviously after Order 66. So she's stuck around for that. But yeah, as far as in the Bad Batch, just in my thoughts, I don't see where you bring her back in right now. I think because we're at episode 9, we got 6 more episodes, is that right? 10 to 15.
Yep.
Um, so I don't know where you'd fit her in. I think she's done. I think Fennec might be done as well. Well, I don't know about Fennec. Fennec may stick around for another episode. Some bounty hunter stuff going on. But I think Asajj was brought in specifically for, I hate to say it, marketing a little bit. Where we need to bring somebody that is force sensitive, because obviously we have if Omega does have this high M count, when you and I kind of decided that that's what the case was, you need somebody to kind of explain it to her. And I think if you're going to bring Asajj back into Star Wars at all, this is a great launching point. You throw her in there, and then you bring her in. And I don't know if anything goes forward, like come forward as far as like after the Bad Batch is done, but I'm thinking of Tales of the Jedi. I'm thinking of
Mm,
other content that that you can bring Asajj in. I kind of mentioned comic books. You can mention another book. You can mention just other things. Um, we would love an Asajj Omega type of collaboration where she is teaching Omega the ways of the Force, so things like that maybe. But like I said, as far as Bad Batch is concerned, I think we're done with this season for her. But other projects that involve Asajj, you saw how hype everybody was when she came out in the trailer, and
Yeah.
there's a reason. So they know that maybe she's not going to be the next Ahsoka, but she's going to be something that's going to bring eyes back to the screens.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. Okay, yes or no, and then we'll have you grade the episode. Yes or no, will Asajj be in live action Star Wars before the end of 2025?
No, no, we're gonna
Okay.
say no. We're gonna say no.
Okay. Okay. Will she be in live action Star Wars ever?
Yes, that's more of a hope.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I'd probably give both the same answers as you for what it's worth. That does feel a little soon in the timeline, but like you said, hopeful that we'll get it at some point in the future. So, all right, time has come. Episode 9. We've given our thoughts. What did you feel about the episode? Our initial gradings you can find at the end of our reaction to the episode over on YouTube. But having had a chance to digest the contents of the episode, be sticking with our initial gradings, or what are you going with?
Yeah, I'm sticking with 9. I was very happy with this episode. The tests again kind of came up, and maybe I wasn't the happiest about those, but part of me is like the reason for Asajj actually wasn't for those tests. It was to more be kind of being able to explain and demonstrate some of the Force for Omega and the crew, whether it is through taming that Squidlack or really besting the three of the remaining three of Clone Force 99. Just to see that all again was just amazing. So I'm gonna stick with the 9.
I like it. Yeah, I am as well. I think I'm predominantly going 9, obviously largely based off the inclusion of Asajj. I think for what it's worth, the reason I wouldn't go higher, while I love Asajj and while I love what she brought to this episode and the conversations with Omega, and just the possibility of her being in Star Wars moving forward, a lot of that is why I'm giving the episode a 9. And I don't know how much the episode actually did in terms of the grand scheme of things. I mean, if you look at where the Bad Batch is now and where they were at the beginning of the episode, it's not that much different. Now they just kind of know what M count is,
Right, right, right.
um, which I guess is useful, but nonetheless, it progressed the story nicely. But largely, this episode was about the inclusion of Asajj, which is why I'm going to go 9 out of 10. And although I think it still came up just slightly short for me in terms of like the overall story of
Yeah.
season 3, so that's what's kind of holding it back from being higher for me personally. But
Yeah, and I think that's okay that we don't have any 10s right now.
yeah, that's true. It gives us space for the last 6 episodes of the season, which also gives us an opportunity to pose the question for next week's Off Hangout podcast. Will Omega use a Force power this season? Is Omega going to use the Force? I don't know. We saw Sabine do it in Ahsoka, so I'm not
Right.
gonna say I'm not gonna say no to that one. But let us know down in the comments. Not only will Omega use the Force power this season, but what would you grade Episode 9 on a scale of 1 to 10? Again, let us know down in the comments or on any of the socials. Which also now is an opportunity remind you that on next week's episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast, episode 75, 3/4 of the way to 100, by the way, we're going to be talking about episode 10 of The Bad Batch, recapping it, reviewing it, and discussing it here as always. Again, it's hard to believe we're already 2/3 of the way through the final season of this show. A little
Yep.
sad to say, but nonetheless, it's been quite the ride so far, and looking forward to experiencing the last 6 episodes of this show with you, Joey.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the home stretch. It's almost the home stretch.
Yeah, yeah, hard to believe. Well, as always, you can catch the Hoth Hangout podcast over on YouTube for the video version of the podcast. You can also catch our reactions there to all the new Bad Batch episodes, as well as the latest Star Wars shows and box breaks. We've got a couple more of those available over on YouTube as well. A recent
My
one.
poor wallet.
Yeah. Respects to Joey's wallet for that video. Yeah. Although you did pull a couple cool
I did.
cards
Yeah, there's some
for what
nice
it's
ones.
worth.
You guys got to check it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Shout out to all of you who are subbed over on YouTube, nearing 400. Thank you to the 398 of you who are subscribers there. You can contact us via email at hothhangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars related thoughts or questions. We'd love to showcase them here on the pod. Hoth Hangout podcast is also findable wherever you get your pods, including Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, leave a 5-star review. We would appreciate it very much. And it does also allow Hoth Hangout to be more easily discovered by other folks as well. You can find us on the socials, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, or X. We're findable at Hoth Hangout on each of those locations. The Hoth Hangout community Discord server, as previously mentioned, is up and coming, brand new, a great place to be if you're a Star Wars fan. So if you're interested in that, you can find the link to join down in the show notes of today's episode. Having said all of that, Joey, any last thoughts on this week's episode of The Bad Batch, Asajj Ventress, or anything otherwise?
I miss her already. I miss Asajj. Because, like I said, I think this is the last we see of her, but I was so glad to see her back in Star Wars. And hopefully we see more of her and we get to talk more about her and read more about her because she's such a great character.
Yeah, I hope we get to see more of her soon. Maybe even in the rest of the season of The Bad Batch. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. Maybe. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Shout out to Squidlax. And a special thank you to Gibbo for producing the Hoth Hangout show, videos, and assets, who could also best a Squidlack, as we're calling it, just like Asajj Ventress. We appreciate each and every single one of you for listening to this week's episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Once again, tune in next week to episode 75, where we will be breaking down and discussing episode 10 of the third and final season of The Bad Batch. And we look forward to seeing you then. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much for listening, and may the Force be with you.